Hello grade 11s. Today we're going to be talking about blood disorders and blood typing. So blood disorders. There are some very common ones, some ones that you are probably familiar with, but we're going to explore them in a little bit more detail today, one of which is hemophilia. Some of you may know what this is, but this is a lack of a specific clotting factor. So your blood does not clot properly. Many people in the royal family have hemophilia, and again, this is due to a lot of inbreeding in the past is one of the reasons why, right? You get a higher incidence of genetic disorders when you inbreed, but a lot of people in the royal family do have this genetic disorder, and you actually need to go for injections of these factors that they are missing. So the symptoms will include, obviously, you will not clot as easily, so your bleeds will last longer, so easy nosebleeds, easily bruised, you have joint and muscle pain due to bleeding, you get blood in your urine, and if you have severe hemophilia, even small injuries could be life-threatening without treatment. Now, again, they're injected with purified clotting factor, so you can actually go in and you can donate plasma that contains these clotting factors. So someone with hemophilia, their blood does not clot properly, therefore they will continue to bleed. Anemia. Anemia is much more common in women than it is in men, and this is going to be a lack of healthy red blood cells. Now, obviously, if you're anemic, if you lack red blood cells, what do you think happens to your ability to exchange respiratory gases? Right? It goes down. So if you're anemic, you can often be low in energy, and you can suffer a lot of those symptoms that we talked about with altitude sickness. So this may be caused by many conditions. You can have loss of blood, there can be infections, this can be due to poor nutrition. And by the way, it's not necessarily poor nutrition. Some people just are not as good at absorbing the iron from their food. So for certain individuals, they do need to take special medications or supplements to get the iron they need to make healthy red blood cells. Now, symptoms will often include fatigue, pale skin, short of breath, feeling cold. And the treatment really does depend on the cause. Again, most of the time, this is nutritional anemia. They're not getting enough iron absorbed into their body. Severe cases, you actually may need to get blood transfusions. So again, anemic, you have less red blood cells. Sickle cell anemia. We do, I believe, have a couple students at the school that have this within their gene pool. Now, this is a fatal hereditary blood disorder, and it's weird that you would still find it in populations because it is fatal, right? So usually fatal disorders, you don't really find much in the human population. They're exceptionally rare because, well, it kills you. But sickle cell anemia is quite interesting. Now, if you have one copy of the sickle cell gene, it protects you against malaria. If you get two copies of the gene, your red blood cells become so misshapen, they can't properly exchange gases, and it is fatal at that point. So, it is interesting that this gene still exists in our population, and it has to do with the fact that malaria is so deadly. So in many parts of Africa that are ravaged still by malaria, you actually find quite a bit of this gene in those populations. Leukemia. We talked about leukocytes, white blood cells. Leukemia is cancer of white blood cells. Now, cancer is uncontrolled cellular division. So clearly, if we were looking at someone's blood that was cancerous, right, someone that had leukemia, you would find a bunch of white blood cells. Now, this is the most common type of cancer in children. It is quite deadly, but believe it or not, we're pretty much closer than ever before to a cure for blood cell cancers. In fact, there has been successful complete curing of T helper cell cancers, and what they do is they actually have used HIV virus to incorporate healthy genes into those cancerous cells, so to fix the problems those cancerous cells have with their DNA. We're now exploring other ways that we can cure cancer with CRISPR genetic engineering techniques. One that we've had some success with is reprogramming white blood cells to specifically target cancer. I suggest you read more about it. It is fascinating stuff. Now, this causes the immune system to not function properly, which is bad because, well, we need a healthy immune system to kill cancer cells. Your body is really good at killing cells that are misbehaving. Every day, your immune system kills a cell that would have turned into cancer. So we need a functioning immune system to prevent cancer as well. Now, obviously, this is mostly often treated with chemotherapy. Surgery isn't as available of an option. Obviously, we can remove tumors as they appear throughout the body, but it's a blood cell cancer, so it's not localized, which is often why it's so deadly. Tumors can set up shop anywhere in your body. So normal blood, you would have a mixture of white blood cells, platelets. Leukemia, you see a much higher incidence of white blood cells. Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is cancer of lymphatic cells. When we get to the immune system, we're going to explore the lymphatic system in much more detail. But you all know where your lymph nodes are. When you're sick, if you feel right here, this part of your neck, under your armpits, it often gets swollen. That's where your lymph nodes are. We're going to talk again their function in the immune system, but Hodgkin's lymphoma is going to be cancer of the lymph nodes. And unfortunately, since the lymphatic system draws from all of the parts of the body, it's very easy for this cancer to spread. Here's an individual with Hodgkin's lymphoma. You can see a very large tumorous lymph node here. So now let's talk about blood typing. Now, this is admittedly quite challenging for students because we are going to be throwing a lot of new terminology at you. And for many of you, you're not going to fully understand it until we talk about the immune system, and that's okay. But for now, do your best to try to figure out who can donate to who. Why is it that some people can only receive certain blood types, but they are fine receiving others? Now, there are 4 main blood types: A, B, AB, and O. They are determined by proteins called antigens that can be found on the surface of red blood cells. Now, the A, B, AB, and O, that refers to which antigens you have on your cells. So, type A blood has A antigen on its membrane, and as a result, you will always produce antibodies to the things that you do not have. So, you will make anti-B antibodies. Some of you may be thinking, well, what about type O? Type O means you have no antigens whatsoever, so there is no O antigen. There's only A's and B's. So type B blood, you have B on the surface, which means that you are going to produce what you don't have. You're going to have type A antibody. Type AB blood has A antigen and B antigen, so you have all the antigens, therefore you're not going to produce any antibodies. And type O has no antigens, therefore you're going to produce both type A and type B. Now you may be asking yourself, well, Mr. Salt, what the heck is an antigen and what the heck is an antibody? Antigens are typically things that your immune system can recognize. So when we look at A and B antigen, these are things that our immune system can see on our red blood cells and they can react to. Antibodies is a way our body reacts to antigens. If you have an antigen in you that is non-self, that is not you, your body will make antibodies against it. Antibodies can cause a cascade of effects that will destroy whatever that antigen is. So, if you have type A blood, which means you have A antigen, you will produce anti-B antibodies. You will produce antibodies against things that are not you, non-self antigens. So an antibody, an immunoglobulin, is a very important part of our immune system. They are essential for fighting pathogens, but also they can kill us if we are injected with the wrong type of blood. And we'll talk about why in a second. So, your B antigens, again, if you have type B blood, A is non-self, so you make A antibodies. Group AB, you have both antigens, therefore you will make no antibodies, because if you made antibodies, you would attack yourself and die. That'd be a horrible strategy. And lastly, type O, you have no antigens, therefore you make both antibodies. Now, you may have heard the terms universal donor and universal recipient before. In fact, if your parents have donated blood and they are type O negative, I'm sure they complain about how often Blood Services Canada bugs them to donate blood. Why is that? Why would they bug them? Well, that's because type O blood has no antigens. Therefore, you injecting those blood cells into somebody else will not have an immune reaction. Think about it. That person, let's say they are type A blood. They will have anti-B antibodies in their blood. Now, if you inject them with type O, remember, type O has no antigens, so there's no antibodies that are going to bind to it and cause a reaction. So type O blood, anybody can receive. So anybody can receive type O blood. Now, the universal recipient, on the other hand, is going to be the one that, no matter what antigen they get, well, it's going to be recognized as one of their own, right? Like, if we look at someone who's AB individuals, they have A antigen, they have B antigen, and as a result, they do not make antibodies against their own antigens. So you can inject them with A blood, with B blood, with O blood. It doesn't matter, they can receive everything. Now you may be confused. I've listed here Rh negative and Rh positive. So there is one more blood antigen we will explore, but it was discovered much later. We will get there, but for now, know that there is one more antigen. We call it the Rh antigen or the D antigen. But for now, let's just focus on A, B, and O. Alright, so how can you read your blood test results? So if you go in and get your blood tested, what they're going to do is they're going to take some droplets of your blood, they're going to put them in little wells, and to those wells, they will add anti-A and anti-B, and they'll also add anti-Rh, and they'll stir it up and they'll see what happens. Now, if we look at this chart here, we can see what these blood types are based on whether the blood agglutinates or not. Now, agglutination is a really fancy word for it clumps up. So, if the antibodies react with those red blood cells, they will cause clumping, and therefore the blood cell does have that antigen. So if we look at O positive blood, That means positive means it does have the Rh. You can see that it clumps up in that well. If we look at, for example, A negative blood, right? Anti-A antibody caused agglutination or clumping. Therefore, that blood has A antigen, and you are type A. So it's really not complex when you get your blood tested. It doesn't take very long at all. They just mix it with those antibodies to figure out which antigens you have. Now, normally we would do a lab where you get to test this on your own with synthetic blood. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. But in the lab, this is how it would appear. Right? If you mix your antibodies and blood together, you would see that some agglutinate and some do not. What blood type is this individual? What blood type is this individual here? Well, if we see agglutination in anti-A, that means they have A antigen. And here, they have D antigen, so this would be A positive blood. Now let's look at it in a little more detail in regards to how this blood clumps together. Okay, let's say we had a person with type A blood, right? So here's their red blood cell, and they have A antigens, which I'm just going to draw as triangles here. Okay? And let's say that we put in an anti-A antibody. So we're testing their blood, right? We're putting in anti-A antibody. What's going to happen? Well, that antibody has an active site, right, that's going to bind to this antigen. What will then happen is these antibodies will have many active sites, and they will bond to an antigen on another red blood cell, right? And there's one on another red blood cell. Well, and then there can be one on another red blood cell over here. You get the idea. What's going to happen to our red blood cells? Well, they are going to clump together. They are going to agglutinate as a result. Now, why would this be bad if it got injected into your body? Think about it. Like, why would it be bad if your blood agglutinates within your blood vessels? Why would that be bad? Right? Because agglutination is going to be the clumping together due to cross-linking by antibodies. Why would that be bad if that happens in your blood? Well, think about it. Your blood vessels are quite small. So if you get a bunch of stuff clumping together, it can form a blockage or a clot, which can lead to heart attacks, it can lead to stroke, it can lead to pulmonary embolisms. Very, very serious and deadly events. So getting the wrong blood type is very deadly. It's very important that you receive the right blood type. So I'm going to say you're receiving the wrong blood type. Can cause blockages in blood vessels, and this can lead to things like stroke, heart attack, etc. So it is extremely, extremely serious if you get the wrong blood type. So these are the most common blood types in North America. Keep in mind, worldwide, different countries have different proportions of blood types. Asia's prominent blood types look very different than ours. But O positive is hands down the most common. I am O positive. O negative, the most desirable, is only 7% of the population. And if you are O negative, you probably should donate blood, because not only are you the universal donor, who can you only receive blood from? You can only receive blood from O negative, right? So when it comes to being a rare blood type, you should donate blood, because one day you may need blood of that type. So looking at the genetics behind blood, you get one gene from your mom and one gene from your dad. And that gene you get from your mom and your dad will determine your blood type. If you get a copy of A gene from your mom and a copy of A gene from your dad, well, you're going to be type A. If you get a copy of one A gene and one not gene, one gene that does not code for any antigens, you're still type A because you're producing A antigens. When it comes to B, it's going to be 2 copies of B or 1 copy. AB is going to be getting A from one parent, B from the other, and type O is receiving 2 non-functional antigen genes. You don't code then for any antigens. Now, if you are type A, you can receive blood from type A or type O. Right? You can always receive blood that you have the antigens for. Who can you not receive blood from? Type B, right? If you are type A, you cannot receive blood from any B antigens. So that'd be type B blood or type AB. If you're type B, you can receive blood from B and O, but you cannot receive blood from anything that has A antigen. Remember, you will always attack things that are not you, right? Anything that's recognized as not self, your body will attack. AB, you can receive from anyone, because you have the antigens A and B, so you can receive from O, A, or B type blood. And lastly, if you are type O, you can donate to everyone because you have no antigens, but you can only receive from type O. Alright, so now let's talk briefly about the Rh blood systems. Again, there is one other antigen that was discovered later on, which is why we've added the positive negative to your blood, right? I'm O positive, which means I have just the Rh antigen on my red blood cells. Now, why is it called Rh or D? Well, it was discovered in rhesus monkeys quite a bit later on, after we figured out A, B, and O blood types. Now, mainly we discovered it later because it does function a little differently. The first time you are exposed to type Rh positive blood, if you're Rh negative, you don't really have an immediate reaction because your body doesn't naturally produce anti-D antibodies. You need to be exposed to it once in order to produce those antibodies. So it's the second exposure that you would have a bad reaction. Now, we call it Rh positive if the D antigen is present, Rh negative if the D antigen is not present. So if you are O negative, that truly does mean you have no antigens at all. Right? No A, no B, and no D at all. So think of Rh just like you would A and B, right? If you do not have Rh being injected with Rh blood, you will start to produce antibodies against that blood. Most of the human population is Rh positive, which is another reason why it didn't really show up initially. And antibody to Rh factors, again, do not develop automatically. So you're not born with anti-D antibodies. It's something you develop upon exposure. And the only way we see Rh incompatibility is when an Rh negative person is exposed to the Rh antigen through either transfusion or pregnancy. And that other one there, pregnancy, is one that we're going to explore in quite a bit more detail. So if we look at this, Rh positive individuals, you have the antigen. If you have it, you can only donate to people that also have it. So you can only donate to Rh positive, but you can receive from Rh positive or Rh negative, right? If you're Rh negative, you don't have the D antigen, therefore you can donate to those Rh positive people. If you're Rh negative, you can donate to anyone. Now, if you are Rh negative, however, you can only receive blood that is also Rh negative. Alright, so let's now look at Rh factor complications. These are related to pregnancy. And what happens is, if a mother is Rh negative, and a baby is Rh positive, right? Your dad was Rh positive, gave that gene to the child, the first kid will be fine. Right? So the first kid's fine, develops completely normally, but upon birthing, the mother is exposed to the infant's blood, right? To the infant's bodily fluids. At that point, she will then develop those anti-D or anti-Rh antibodies. Right? She forms those antibodies against the baby's Rh positive blood. Now, first pregnancy, completely fine. Second pregnancy, if that child is also Rh positive, now there can be a big issue. Because the mother's blood with those anti-D antibodies will attack the baby's blood. Right? It'll attack that fetus's blood. This condition is known as erythroblastis fetalis. And again, the mother's antibodies destroy the fetus's red blood cells, which leads to severe anemia, and in severe cases can cause brain damage and death. So it is very important, if you are having a child, you will go get your blood tested, your husband will get their blood tested, to see if Rh incompatibility would be a concern. Right? If the mother's Rh positive, doesn't matter. If the mother's Rh negative and the dad's Rh positive, then there are some concerns if you're planning to have more than one child. Alright, so I know it's a little confusing, it's a lot to take in. I have a game that's going to help you with figuring out blood types. It is a really, really good game. I recommend you go through the nitty-gritty with it. If you click on the little test tubes, you can even see how the blood is being joined by antibodies. You can click on the test tubes and you can see interactions, you can see what is happening, and if you give the person the wrong blood type, it has hilariously bad sound effects. So please play the game. I will link it on my website. But the game is going to expect you to be able to answer questions like this. If we were testing an individual's blood and we saw that we had agglutination here, here, and not here, what blood type is this individual? So they have agglutination in A, Rh, but not in B. Oh, I forgot to cover it up. They are type A positive. This individual is A positive, right? So they are able to receive blood from whom? Who can they receive blood from? If they are A positive, they can receive blood from any blood type that also has their antigens and does not contain B antigen in this case, right? The only antigen that they do not have. So they can receive blood from O negative, O positive, A negative, and A positive. They cannot receive from any Bs or any ABs. What antibody would you find in their blood? Right, you would find anti-B antibody because they're going to produce those antibodies against non-self antigens, which is B in this case. Next up, we have this individual here. They have agglutination in A and B, but not in RH. What is this blood type? This is type AB negative. AB negative. So what blood types can someone who's AB negative receive from? If you're AB negative, can you receive from A positive? No, why not? Well, it's because positive means you have the D antigen. So you can receive from any blood type that does not contain the D antigen. So you can receive from any of the negatives. You can receive from A negative, B negative, O negative, or AB negative. What can you donate to? What can you donate to if you're AB negative? You can donate to people that have A and B antigen. So you can donate to AB negative and AB positive. In your booklets, you do have a chart where you should go through and figure out who can donate to who and who can receive from who. It is extremely important that you understand that for your upcoming test and for the final examination. So again, agglutination means you have that antigen because you added antibodies that caused that agglutination. And why was it bad to receive the wrong blood type? Why is it bad to get that wrong blood type? Well, it'll cause agglutination, clumping, clotting in your blood. This can block blood vessels, cause stroke, heart attack, pulmonary embolism. Okay, well that's all for today. If you have questions, please let me know, and have a good one.